everyone. It is indeed a great pleasure to have such a very luminary panel with all of us here for the first edition of the Capital Clarity series. Uh, we are privileged to have this interesting conversation around the area of corporate banking, cash management, transaction banking, and everything associated with the corporate business, especially the banking sector. And along with me today, we have very interesting panel comprising of the corporate banking heads, mid corporate banking heads, cash management heads, and trade finance heads of some of the leading banks in the country. And to take us forward with this conversation today, we have Mr. Eric Anklesaria, who is the BFSI practice head of Capgemini. What we are going to discuss today is first understand where do we stand today in the area of corporate banking? How has the past 6 months impacted the business of corporate banking? How are we moving forward today? What are the kind of business strategies that have got reimagined in this past few months? What kind of technology trends are seen in this industry, and what is it that we are going to see in the future? What kind of interesting insights has the new age of transparency and technology brought in? I would now like to hand over to Eric to kindly take over this conversation.
So thanks a lot, Babu. Thank you very much for the starting words. Yeah, I think it's my privilege to be kind of moderating this panel discussion on corporate banking. The theme of which is really termed as the roadmap to rise. From an introduction perspective, I'll first introduce myself, and then I will request each of the panel members, as Babu said, to kind of introduce themselves. My name is Eric Anklesaria. I basically globally lead the banking capital markets transformation practice for Capgemini. Prior to joining Capgemini, I was a partner leading the IT advisory practice for KPMG, and prior to that, a partner leading the IT advisory and management consulting practice for Ernst & Young. So this has been my background. Have been working in the global and Indian industry for the last 20 years. I would now request Parag to kind of introduce himself.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Babu. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to be with such an esteemed panel. My name is Parag Igbote, and I'm based in Singapore. I head corporate banking business development for Oracle in a region that we term as JPAC and MEA. It's been 20 years plus in the transaction banking, corporate banking space that I've spent now. And I'm really looking forward to a great discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you, Parag. Monu, can you kind of go next, please?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So, yeah, hi, my name is Monu Jain. I have been in the corporate banking space for more than 20 years. I currently head the mid corporate banking business for IndusInd Bank. It's a great pleasure to be here to share my thoughts and views with everyone, and also get the opinions of our other esteemed panelists. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Monu. Thank you. Rajesh, can you be next, please?
Hi, great. Thanks, Eric and Babu. So look forward to the entire discussion. I am Rajesh Lahori. I am with RBL Bank and head the cash management product. 22 plus odd years in this business, covering process, technology, product, implementation, redefining some of the product landscape, if I may call, on the transaction banking side. So it's my passion. I like doing what this is. So that's why so many years in this business.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you very much. Mr. Venkatesh, can you be next, please?
Hi, Eric, Babu, and I'm Venkatesh Bharadwaj with State Bank of India. I am Chief General Manager heading the corporate clients group, taking responsibility for operations and business support. I've been at the State Bank for quite some years, and we've worn multiple hats. Was head of Network of Punjab, Chandigarh, and had a stint in global markets and also in IT supporting our foreign offices. And so look forward to the deliberations today. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Mr. Srinivas, next, please.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Mr. Babu. I am Srinivasan Vedantam from ICICI Bank, part of the trade processing team for 23 years. And then recently part of the trade product team, heading trade product and digital adoption for the bank.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. Thank you very much for this introduction, and a very warm welcome once again to all the panel members. Starting off with the discussion, I think COVID-19 has taught us a lot more about humanity than anything else has. If one was to really look at how the pandemic has affected us globally, here are some interesting statistics from a global perspective. We've seen net interest income really collapse as the central banks have cut policy rates near to zero or negative. Provisions have spiked up to the highest in a level in the entire decade, approximately 14x pre-crisis level. Outlook for 2020 is overall revenues for corporate and transaction banking to be down by nearly 10%. So this is really the kind of global statistics or numbers that one would really see from a corporate banking space. Banks have had to manage the challenge of meeting the extraordinary demand from corporates and SMEs during this emergency and crisis. And as a result of which, we say that the economic impact on corporate banking has been real. There have been competitive threats from newer entrants, etc., which were there in the pre-COVID times, but of late we've seen that those challenges have been really moderated out, with some of them not being able to sustain the business models and are really challenged to really grow in this space. So that's mainly from a global perspective, just a very small snapshot. From an Indian banking scenario, if one was to see during FY16 to FY20, credit offtake has grown at a CAGR of nearly 13.9%. Deposits in the same period grew at a CAGR of 6.81% to reach about 1.9 trillion by 2020. Non-performing assets as on FY19 have shown the highest recovery in the last 4 years to nearly about 4 lakh crores, which is approximately 57.23 billion in FY19, which is the highest amount of recovery that we've done in the last 4 years. When it comes down to the impact of COVID, and we really talk about the last 5 to 6 months, the banking credit growth across sectors has been negative. All major industries have shown a decline or a negative growth. There has been an aversion towards unsecured lending and retail and microcredit, and the overall industry-wise credit growth has been negative from that perspective, which has given rise to about 4 or 5 key areas that one would really look at. Stress of the PSU banks' balance sheet, since they really govern about 65% of the overall banking assets in the country. NBFC liquidity crisis. There have been liquidity crises with the non-banking financial services sector, where I think the credit lending has been pretty much curtailed by all banks. There is a macroeconomic slowdown which is impacted, and last but not the least, has resulted into compressed interest margins as far as we talk about the impacts of COVID-19. The IMF has said that the recession in 20 to 21 will at least last and serve during the economic downfall, and it's greater than the crisis of 2008. The GDP has really, post the 23.9% GDP contraction in between April to June, now we see that economic activities are really getting back on its feet, and the banking sector is really posed for a lot of challenges, as we will talk further in the discussion. But also the brighter side is that there are a lot of opportunities which one looks at, and kind of different business models that are emerging in this entire space. So without taking much time now, I would now go on to the esteemed panel members to really give an overview and outlook of how they see the industry moving, what are the key trends, what are the key things to be watching out for, and how they see the next few years panning out. With that, I would kind of direct my first question to Parag. And I would request Parag to give a global outlook on what he really believes and sees as the global outlook for corporate banking currently and in the years to come. Some of the things that he can basically talk about is the trends, challenges, and biggest roadblocks, what he sees in terms of the corporate banking panning out.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. And I think the statistic that you gave is very much in line with what's really been happening globally. So, from my perspective, given my mandate, and I look after a much larger region in Asia and also in Middle East Africa, I think while there's been a lot of support that different governments have been giving to banks and ensuring that there's enough and more liquidity into the system, I think still there is a lot of concern that continues. So all the statistics that you presented are very real. They're very relevant, and I think and whatever you see in India. Even pre-COVID, the challenges that we had from an NPA perspective, and they obviously became more and more severe in India. But globally, what we are seeing is the same. So drawdowns, all the credit facilities that the clients have taken, one is seeing a lot of drawdowns from clients, and these are large corporates that I see in different markets. The revision of loan loss provision is obviously a very big drain on the capital that the banks have to provide for, and therefore the capital adequacy ratio is definitely under stress, and compressed NIMs, as you rightly said. But interestingly, on the flow business, it has impacted quite a bit as well. So I see a lot of stress around fee-based income, and that goes across all the different lines of businesses for the bank when it comes to the fee income. So these are very common, and I think there is a common thread across that is going. However, interestingly, I see some demands which is coming back, and I think I'll talk more about it as we go along. But from a trends perspective, I see trends. There are a few trends that I see going. Number one, as all of us know, I think it's a cliche that digitization is really accelerated, and I think that is very real. It is on everyone's agenda. One interesting thing that I've been observing is a lot of emphasis that banks are laying on ensuring that they're empowering their RMs or their coverage staff with a lot of interesting analytics, so that they can have meaningful conversations which are very specific to an industry or to the client. So I see a lot of that which is taking place. So empowerment of RMs and the coverage staff. Another interesting thing is I see, I mean, given coming from Oracle, I see a tremendous focus on simplifying the legacy systems or the legacy landscapes. So there is a lot of conversations that I'm right now a part of, where there is a lot of transformation programs that are happening in the space of trade or lending or cash management and others. Then, of course, how do I reduce my time to market or reduce my cost to automate and so on? So AI ML is again a very big discussion point, as we see. And lastly, people are looking at monetizing the investments that they've made in these infrastructure. Even pre-COVID, they're trying to figure out how do they want to monetize. So focus on partnerships is a very, very interesting conversation, to your point, where the neo banks coming in or the fintechs coming in. How do I monetize the kind of infrastructure? For example, monetization of APIs is a very interesting trend that I see in the marketplace. Yep. Eric, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Parag, for sharing your views. I'll now move on to Monu. Monu, the question for you is that what is the impact of COVID-19 on corporates in India, and what is the outlook on their recovery looking like?
It's no secret that corporates in India have been very severely impacted. Eric mentioned the statistic of 23.9% decline in Q1 GDP, which is a very, very well-known fact. There is another estimate from a Business Line survey of 3,800 listed entities, which showed that the revenues, aggregate revenues, have declined by 34%. That's just for the listed entities. The unlisted smaller ones have had near zero operations from experience. So no doubt Q1 has been very, very difficult for corporates in India because of COVID. They have been impacted because of the strict lockdowns, the shutdown of industrial activity, and severe disruption to supply chains. Q2 has been slightly better, and the GDP is expected to have recovered to -7 to -9%. The numbers are expected any day now, primarily on the back of festive demand, pent-up demand. It's not very clear. The key question really being asked is this recovery sustainable, or is it going to be back to a slippage because of the second wave of pandemic that's coming, and we can see lockdown restrictions coming up. So as we enter the 8th month of the COVID lockdown, it is apparent that the impact of COVID has been very varied across corporates, depending on the sector, on their size, and their agility to adapt the business models. Like, few trends are clearly emerging. One is that the pandemic has impacted different borrowing segments differently. The smaller ones have been impacted much more than the larger ones due to smaller balance sheet flexibility. So you'll have the MSMEs and the SMEs much more impacted than the mid corporates and the large corporates. There was a study on the moratorium data done by CRISIL, which also showed that the moratoriums availed by the smaller companies were at least 3 times more than the ones availed by larger corporates. The second key trend is that the COVID has widened the differential between sectors vastly. Corporates in select sectors have clearly emerged as winners, and that's because of structural shift in consumer behaviors. You have sectors like FMCG, essential commodities, pharma, specialty chemicals, IT peripherals, you name it, agriculture, internet economy. These have all been the beneficiaries, and corporates in these sectors have actually seen much better sales than pre-COVID levels. And on the flip side, you have sectors like tourism, travel, hotel industry, which have been badly impacted because of social isolation. The third thing is that there is a strong polarization trend, with the big getting bigger. It is primarily because the smaller companies haven't been able to survive the cash crunch, and their businesses have shifted to the larger companies. There was an estimate that at least 1 in 3 small businesses or self-employed businesses shut shop in the earlier months of COVID because they just could not survive. And hence the companies which are from these positive sectors or the niche segments, they are generating cash surpluses in excess of previous pre-COVID levels. Now, these companies have developed a huge aversion to leverage. This is a very interesting trend. And they have prepaid their debts. And if they need more capital for growth, they're accessing equity capital markets rather than reliance on debt. So you clearly have the haves and the have-nots in the new age post-COVID era. Now, the companies which have been impacted are coping up by focusing on several strategies. Primarily, they need their working capital financing to continue. They want to stabilize their supply chains. Many have embarked on cost reductions, and they're changing their operating models. So the impact has been very severe, no doubt. However, in the second quarter, in recent months, the recovery has been very sharp. And as we saw that the GDP is expected to recover, there is a BSE 200 profitability projection. So till as late as about July, it was expecting the FY22 profits to be minus 15%. It's like a future projection of the expectation of profitability, and hence is an indication of recovery. It has now jumped up to a positive 4%. Very, very clear indicator that there is a strong positivity among corporates regarding their future recoveries. All are high frequency data in the economy, the GST, e-way bills, power consumption, they're all showing positive trends. Of course, November has shown a little bit dip over October, but on the whole, it's been a positive trend. So now the real question is that, will this survive, or is this a blip? I think on the longer trend, the corporates are on a road to recovery, no doubt. But the speed and the spread, how broad-based will this recovery be, is a key question. My personal view is that the recovery will be lopsided, and it will be select the select sectors, the select companies who found their niches and who've been agile will be able to recover faster, better, stronger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Monu. Thank you for sharing this, the complete overall and view. It was really some important thoughts out here. Moving on to Rajesh. Rajesh, how do you see the cash and liquidity landscape evolve in India? How have you seen that evolve in India? And what has changed in the current scenario?
And liquidity included. The Indian scenario of definition of cash versus developed markets, there was always a gap. India always was a collection story. There were challenges on the collect side. So the moment you mentioned cash management, manage receivables better, and it was always focused on this. There was never a thought process of the whole liquidity or the payables aspect and all of that. Last couple of years, courtesy digitization, courtesy a lot of great efforts and from the RBI and the various regulatory bodies. So there was a spurt of rollout in terms of newer and quicker settlement methods other than cards and stuff like that. So the NEFT, RTGS and the IMPS story and all of that. So I'm not getting into numbers there, but so that enabled a fair amount of money flow. Now this is the first time ever, and I mean, to the best of my knowledge, first time ever in the global space where the settlement industry or the banking industry or the whole set of entities who actually manage payments and collections as a market are ahead of the commerce or the clients, right? And it put the question or the ball back into various corporate and those end user their court, saying how do you really leverage this and manage this better? So just a very simple example, we've had this for a while, NEFT 24/7, which is largely, if I may say, a quasi corporate. If it's not only a retail channel, but it's fairly used by most corporates, right? Now, I don't think there are too many corporates in India who actually have a 24/7 payment cycle, if you ask me. Now, can that happen? Can it be leveraged for a better costing? Can it be a better risk mitigant and all that? I think some of those thoughts, courtesy this whole COVID related experience and continues to be, I think there are a fair amount of fundamental questions being asked. Different sizes of corporates and different industries, in how they are impacted, are actually utilizing and leveraging a lot of this to effectively either mitigate certain risk, B, or manage the whole process. In some cases, it is a matter of survival where, today physically it's practically impossible to reach out. I think the whole earlier supply chain thought process, because of, the sheer social distancing, logistics and all of that. So that's changed, right? So given that different industries are seeing this in as a great boon, what this has done effectively, so there are people where businesses, at least in the initial 3-4 months, impacted largely, practically shut down for genuine reasons globally, in fact. So huge surpluses, how do we really deploy them efficiently? So that's why you saw a glut of liquidity in the market, even continuing today. I think interest rates being lower and surpluses across lending institutions. This was on the surplus side. There are a fair amount of, Monu referred to some of the industries gaining, substantially pure opportunity coming up in that space, where for them, this is an ideal time to really scale up. So there are people who are looking at this whole space now and utilizing the various efficiencies built up. Parag referred to the digitization story. So there are genuine new, business models being emerged. I think the least one, as a large trend can see, for the first time, I think any and every industry is having a digital vertical, including banks. So banks were fairly automated, at least the ones that evolved later. I think across now, practically there's very little difference beyond a point in terms of the core ability to deliver for a bank to deliver. But with digitization, the outlook was from an outside to inside. So with this COVID thing, it actually made it, what should I say, more a mandatory option rather than being actually a, let me try or let me see what selectively can I pick up from something like this. But I think in these channels, ecosystems getting together between corporate and customers used to happen, and banks used to happen, but now kind of becoming a very, very standard model. A lot of non-banking players, huge variant, because at the cost of getting beaten up, let me say, banks took their time really, acknowledging some of this change. Retail has been quite active, rightfully so, because of it involves a fair amount of geography and people, so that much more visible. Wholesale business is slightly lagging there, but I think it's more the volume there that and the whole security area that's more important, equally important, if not more. So banks took the time. I think with this whole digital story and the ability at a platform, at a base level getting enabled, RBI and regulatory bodies acknowledging this whole select kind of players in the market, be it telecom, non-telecom, tech, fintech, whichever way there's always a debate, fintech or tech fin, right? It doesn't matter. So there are a fair amount of interesting collaboration. I think this COVID has brought about a very clear change from a compete to a collaborate mode. I think all parties realize that if one was to really manage this change right now, and now obviously evolve with newer models, it is much easier and better to collaborate, and there is a win-win situation involved. So fairly exciting one. I think it's a large opportunity that's kind of developed for most financial institutions, because it's a change, and it's how you look at it. Obviously, it comes with a share of challenges, but in challenge is the opportunity. We see it that way. There's a fair amount of market change. I think a very good example is, and this is a classic Indian story. So I'm told, again, could be wrong. So the dematerialization of securities, what India did in probably 6 months or a year, it took some 8 or 10 years abroad to really achieve that kind of scale. So it's something similar where I believe we will be able to transform a fair amount of these ground level challenges, and COVID will act, or the COVID scenario and similar will act as a great push to make that happen.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thanks a lot for sharing your views. Moving on to Mr. Venkatesha from SBI. My question to you is going to be in and around the YONO platform. Currently, as we all know, that YONO is one of the world's largest digital banking platform with over 28 million customers and over 2.6 billion digital loans which have been disbursed. Over 100 ecosystem partners, and still YONO continues to scale to newer heights. My question to you, Mr. Venkatesha, would be that YONO as an integrated platform has transformed the digital picture and customer interactions with the bank. Can you throw some light on the YONO platform, and how did you leverage this platform during the pandemic?
Yeah, in fact, the evolution of YONO has been a huge revelation for us, and the idea came, to have a platform which is a one-stop solution to customers. So you have banking, you have investments, and of course you have the marketplace. So with these three being the pillars, so banking, on the digital space, we have the typical deposits, account opening, remittances, and all of that. And then we have a good ecosystem of the SBI associates into insurance, mutual fund, general insurance, and all of that. So time, to harness, what we have internally and then of course to leverage on our strengths and then partner with business and try to offer value to customers. So with these three being the pillars, so this YONO journey has evolved into something which has been fabulous for us, and there's a lot of learnings which is actually making us look inwards, and also let's say doing some reverse engineering by actually making some of our branches more into YONO branches, the space, the processes and all that we've imbibed from the platform. And like it's grown in size, and we're looking at the number of transactions, particularly during the pandemic. We have seen a huge jump in the digital transactions, 3 times the digital transactions, and the number of accounts that get opened per day online, that is around 20,000 account openings, and then we have 70,000 new users every day. So of course we all realize that anything SBI does is huge, so it's not that much a surprise either. And then when it comes to, let's say, the investments and the market investments, both insurance as well as mutual fund, the delta that we had during this period of the pandemic, our market share in the bank channel is around 10%. So now it's around 30%. I mean, this is thanks to YONO. So it's made a difference. Definitely, the ease of for a customer of YONO replaces, let's say, 100 apps, as you kind of mentioned. So whether it's your Amazon or a Flipkart or a Titan, whatever. So you don't need to have all those apps and I remember all those passwords. So you have one gateway to all of this, and then plus the good thing really, what keeps a guy like me happy, because I have seen I've worked in various verticals. I've worked in of course currently in corporate, but I've seen the digital, the let's say the rural branches and also the small urban centers, and the kind of this one that they have, the traction that's building from there. Like for example, we have the farmers on YONO. You have YONO in 10 languages. So it's not just Hindi or English. So you have Tamil, you have Kannada, you have Telugu, and so on. So you have it's reaching out to 10 languages. So the a farmer, for example, can do his crop loan renewal on YONO, and a farmer again can apply for a gold loan on YONO. So what happens is it has increased the overall efficiency of the system itself, because once the farmer applies for a gold loan on YONO, so it's getting captured, and so there's no question of any let's say inefficiency at the ground level of the branch, delaying the process of sanction or whatever. So that's been huge, this one, and of course it is just as I told you. It's helped branches also now reorient itself on the lines of YONO. So this has been a good thing, and I guess the customer ultimately the pandemic has forced, let's say, bankers to look at helping business focus on its business. So it's like those things that business would waste time on. I think those are things that are simplified by the bank, so that business concentrates on its focus areas, and so that's the value that I guess banks would have to bring to the table.
Yep. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh. Thank you for sharing your views. I'll now proceed to Mr. Srinivas. Mr. Srinivas, the question for you is, since you lead the trade operations, the question for you is going to be around trade. Can you please talk to us about how trade finance in India has evolved over a period of time, and what are the developments you see unfolding?
Very good question, Eric. But having seen my fellow panelists talk about present in detail and various developments that are happening currently in terms of various, digital adoption, digital technology is evolving, and we have seen my previous panelists also talk about in detail about their product. This particular question takes me back, back in the memory lane by around, say, 25 years back when I started my career. So when I first joined the banking area, so still ledgers were there, but ledgers were not used because recently the accounting has been moved to a system, MS Access, which was more like a Excel-based database. So 25 years back, from the trade point of view, trade finance point of view, in the major cities, yeah, 1 or 2 locations, the specific branches of a particular bank will accept trade-related transactions, and they will have a regional office or corporate office setup kind of thing. And with the advent of technology, the improvement of infrastructure that we have in terms of computerization and followed by availability of internet, etc., etc. Slowly, the number of banks adopting trade in multiple locations within the same city, multiple locations within SEZ or domestic tariff area kind of a thing has evolved. And now, in the present day, when we see the number of banks, number of branches through which they offer trade as a service is very much enormous, and that is still going to continue to grow because the customer now is having the option of choice. You can select the bank through which you want to do the transaction. That was not the case the 20 years back when I spoke about, because I very well remember for you to send a SWIFT message in those days, the SWIFT will have a particular system through which only it can be accessed. It will not be available to everyone. So you have to be in a queue. There are 2 people before you waiting for sending the SWIFT message, and then only your turn comes. Why I'm saying this is because over a period of time, with the improvement in technology, with the improvement in the various systems, the option of available information, system of accessibilities have been made very easy to the users. These are all on the bank side. Coming back to the customer side of it, what really has been an evolution over a period of time. We know that my panelist will very well appreciate and understand this, but for the participants, I'm saying this. 20 years back, 25 years back, when FEMA was not there, there has been a more restrictions in the way the foreign exchange transactions have been done. With the advent of the FEMA being evolved and then rolled out, it has become a liberalized one, but still it is being monitored. From there on, when we see the regulators also have relaxed a lot of decision-making authority to the authorized dealers, the banks. And similarly, various instructions have come, and then master circulars we have seen giving the enough rights for the banks to give and take such kind of decisions. The number of referrals to Reserve Bank of India has come down. And also, if you remember, previously, every fortnightly or written, we used to send bunch of documents with the original GR forms and other bill of entries, etc., etc. And then regulators said very clearly, no, don't send it to us. It's going forward. You have to manage it, and you have to ensure reporting timely. So, like that, each and every parameter, whether it is a decision making or customer convenience or deciding the charges for yourself, FEDI has allowed the bank to take those decisions by themselves. And previously, for us to give the export packing credit or export post shipment credit, there has to be a compulsory whole turnover ECGC cover should be obtained by the bank, and that has been relaxed. Now it has become more of an option whether you want to take it or not. And so, over a period of time, the regulators has been more supportive, and the evolutionary process, the regulator played a vital role as a center stage. And around the regulators, the things have started changing in the bank. After 2005, with the advent of all these developments happening, the mushrooming of various back offices for trade processing happens in India.
Yeah.
Then, though till 2010, the improvements have been very steady. After 2010, what we are seeing now is the new fintech companies and new age banks started coming in, and then they actually devise new systemic changes, ready to use kind of thing, which actually be the competition for the existing banks.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing your views. I'll move on to the second set of questions to all the panel members. Would just request them that, in the paucity of time, just to be, kind of be quick in their answers and be precise. From that perspective, moving on to Parag, I think Parag, everybody in the panel has really spoken about, the need to digitize, whether it be trade, whether it be cash, whether it be corporate banking. uh, I think, from your perspective, being a market leader, Oracle being a market leader in providing a lot of solutions to banks, my question to you would be that banks are looking at digitizing paper-based processes and putting top priority on shifting them from institution-driven decision making to data and analytics-based decision making. How is this trend impacting corporate banking and specifically lending, Parag?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. I'll try and be as brief as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So from so paper-based processes, I mean, even pre-COVID, there's been a lot of emphasis in digitizing them and others. But what now we are seeing is obviously that trend continuing or accelerating. But more importantly, an overlay of customer analytics and bank side analytics, which are getting very critical for better decision making, both for the customers and also for internal stakeholders within the bank. So there is a very interesting trend, and I think people like Rajesh and others, we've been discussing this for a very long time in our industry. So cash flow forecasting is again coming up as a very interesting conversation again with banks, and this pandemic has really kind of laid a lot of emphasis on that. Then the entire giving a complete picture on AR APs as to where the corporate is as far as their account receivables or account payables is again a very interesting conversation which we are doing. And like I said previously, the relationship manager and and all the tools given to the relationship manager are the areas where I see a lot of digitization. Specifically on the lending side, Eric, what I see is four broad categories of an impact that's happening. So even prior to COVID, LIBOR transition was a very real thing, and there are rather very real deadlines to by when banks need to transition to LIBOR. So what I see really is the expectation is to kind of get onto an alternative reference rates, and it's a very disruptive process for banks. And it's just the sheer volume of outstanding contracts and others are making it really pretty daunting for banks to kind of go over it. So therefore, I think that's the first thing as far as lending is concerned. The second thing that I see is changes that are required to the existing legacy infrastructure itself. And so the way this entire industry is evolved, as you know, it has ensured that within banks we see a lot of lending islands, as I call them. There is some lending application for middle markets. There is something happening on the lending side on the large corporates. There are some lending applications like the trade finance is a lending application that you have, and so on and so forth. So there are lots of these islands that we see, and that's how it's evolved. Now, interestingly, this pandemic has really kind of brought that to the fore. And the fact that there is not integrated lending platforms that banks have, and they don't know, for example, what is the exposure. There is a lot of work that needs to be done at the background to kind of pull it all together and put it together so that, the management can have some sense of what things are, whether it's to do with your collaterals, whether it's to do with your limits, and so on and so forth. And also with your entire credit decisioning and early warning signals, as we call them, right? So that's the second category that I see, the whole legacy system aspect of it. And it's had a big impact because of COVID. The third is external factors like COVID themselves. And COVID was interesting. After COVID came, the first month or two, the banks were inundated with requests around repricing the loan, rescheduling a loan, moratoriums, and so on and so forth. And many banks realized that there is not much their systems provide in terms of flexibility to in a way accommodate that. And on top of that, you had governments pumping in a lot of money into the banking system to say, this needs to reach the end consumer, whether it be SME or a large corporate, or for that matter, retail. And banks really were challenged on that front. So there are a lot of these interesting things happening on advent of COVID in terms of customer servicing aspect of it. And lastly, the fourth aspect is around customer behavior, because all of us want, although if I'm a owner of a corporate or a owner of an SME, I want to have the similar kind of a user experience as compared to my when I'm accessing it as an individual on the retail side. So therefore, digitization around that is also a very interesting trend that we see. So therefore, just to summarize on lending, the four aspects we're talking about is LIBOR transition is very, very real. Legacy systems and automation and integration front to back again is a very, very real thing that is happening in there. Then the whole customer servicing aspect that I spoke about, and of course the user experience, customer behavior, analytics that customers are asking for today. So there are lots of transformation programs that banks have started, in fact, because some of the banks are using this pandemic as an opportunity to revamp their entire platforms or lending platforms. Eric.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Parag. Thank you for sharing your views. Moving on to Monu. Monu, the question for you has been that COVID-19 has increased the need for real-time visibility on cash positions and liquidity obligations for corporates across borders and across business regions. Amidst these changes, what services are corporates demanding from COVID-19 perspective, and how have they evolved over time?
So as you rightly say, Eric, the one key metric which is top of the ladder for all corporates suffering from COVID is cash. Managing their cash, whether it is on the debt obligations which are critical to be met, or managing the liquidity to maintain continuity of their operations, because working capital cycles have been severely disrupted. So banks have been actually swamped by requests from clients on various kinds of needs and newer needs in line with their changing scenarios. So if I could bucket these customer requirements into four broad categories, that is into credit, advisory, operational flexibility to make sure working capital churn is faster, and making supply chains more efficient, so trade and cash solutions. So the most critical requirement for the cash-starved corporates has been incremental financing needs. So as Eric was also touching upon, corporates have swamped banks with needs for ad hoc financing, government financing under government schemes, restructuring, moratoriums, etc., etc. And these are the most critical thing for them to ensure business continuity. Now, banks have been trying to digitize, and again, Eric touched upon this, that corporate banks are a little slow in adopting digital technology for credit decisioning, partly because credit decisioning is so subjective in corporate banks. But the good news is, and it's very encouraging to note, that corporate banks have been quick to digitize the pre and post credit decisioning processes to expedite the whole flow and to make sure that the volumes are being handled. So data analytics for faster decision making, or it is on the post decision of disbursements and faster money to the client. So that's one bucket on the the other bigger requirement that's coming up is on advisory and guidance. These are unprecedented times, and there are so much uncertainty for corporate clients that they have reached out to the corporate bankers in hordes to ask for the way forward. And corporate banking RMs have stepped up. Again, empowered by enhanced digital tools, like, you will have RMs apps on their phones, which tells them what is the data analytics on the customer, what are their needs, what are their working capital cycles. So the RMs have stepped up to interact with their customers and walk them through what are the regulatory changes, what are the customized solutions which can be provided, what are the industry trends, etc. So the third thing that has come up is operational flexibility. While it just sounds very operational, it has actually helped clients release their working capital, make that faster. So because of unanticipated events, there are multiple ad hoc requests from clients coming up, and because of work from home disruptions, they have asked for multiple leniency from corporates banking, and corporate banking has stepped up to ensure that the corporates get those. And it is also nice to see that the RMs have been encouraging the corporate clients to use more online interfaces, so that a lot of their transactional flows are streamlined directly without requiring human interface. There is also very interesting trend on customization of products and services, because each situation is unique, and more so in corporate banking. We are seeing interesting trade solutions that are coming up. One such thing is what is evolving is ecosystem financing. So what it really does is that it tracks the cash flow of the entire ecosystem of a client, from the SME to a mid-corporate to a large corporate, and it gives the benefit of liquidity to the small to the SME by taking recourse to the cash flows of the large corporate. Just to give an example to the audience, for example, you have auto industry, which is deeply impacted, especially in pockets like CVs. Tier 2 vendor will not be able to get finance from a bank. Then a tier 1 vendor may be, and an OEM will definitely be. So you ring fence the cash flows, you give money to the tier 2, the tier 2 sells to the tier 1 sells to the large corporate, and the large corporate pays the bank. So these kind of cluster banking approach is coming up in subsectors to make sure that customized solutions are given to the clients. Then, of course, there is need. Payment solutions are being largely, there is a huge surge in requests for payment solutions. And we have panel experts here who will delve deeper into that and who have touched upon this. But that's a clear trend we are seeing from the clients, because there is need to optimize and maximize the cash that is available.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Monu. I think Rajesh, the next question, and you could kind of touch upon the payments piece also, what Monu was referring to you. But I think what would be very interesting for the audience to know is that what are the emerging trends and products in cash and liquidity management that corporates are really demanding?
Parag, as technology talks a lot about the impact it does on the corporates from business angle. Monu, again, while from a business perspective, but has a fair amount of a direct this on the solutioning and the structuring. So cash is that way very, very essential, and has become one of what I say as the true, the true oxygen in the entire system in this time. So there are people who've, when it's short, have had their bad days, and when not managed well, has had impact, and especially during this time. So obviously, depending on the industry, depending on customers, there is a fair amount of different kind of ask, leading to the whole thought process of solutioning on the wholesale side. We are, and as a bank, RBL, also known as Partners Ka Bank, one of our key offering, if you ask me, is this whole integration API bus that we offer that goes beyond banking. So please understand, the market has changed such. So while overall demands of the client has ensured that there are non-banking players in the whole payments, collections, and the whole settlement industry. Similarly, banks have now smartly stepped up their game and offer solutions which are beyond finance. Okay. Mr. Venkatesh spoke of the YONO model. I think conceptually very similar, where it goes just beyond pure solutions or account management and all, and it's a larger ecosystem where ability for any third party to come on board, right? So the concept and the thought process is very different, and all of this is playing dynamically very, very differently in different segments. So we've one of the big ask, if you say, is this whole what we saw as microservices or an API kind of an ask from customers, where they want individual experiences and touch points with banks, and it's part of their entire workflow. So they decide how they wish to pay. Load it, and there is a big ask coming up with a lot of customers saying we wanted DIY. So you historically forced us to go in a particular way, but we want a choice. So you give us the whole bouquet, and we are going to pick specific services, load them on our side, and you should have the ability to really transact, both pay and collect, whatever be the case, or give us a view which is pan bank. So Parag's point, very, very valid in terms of the whole, single dashboard consolidated across multiple this. I think very much a reality today, because, there are players offering it, banking, non-banking, both. And for a customer, very, very sensible, rather than he have 15 touch points, he's looking at one gate or one option through which this is kind of, being done. What it has also done, and is help manage the whole risk aspect very efficiently. I mean, with digitization, with data, there is a fair amount you can do upstream, downstream, right? So as banks, we've invested and continue to invest in models that really now are able to have a very, very client-specific experience, or a risk model, rather than being very portfolio or a larger revenue. So there was time, for lack of an ability to do, banks or players would look at an entire, thinking aloud. Why is the definition of a corporate bank or a mid-market or an SME? I mean, that's how we as bankers looked at it and classified them, right? Now, with all of them being data points, and a guy actually wanting the same service in remote hinterland versus a Bombay, and if you are giving it on the channel, it really doesn't make a difference, right?
Yep.
So that's the big change which is effectively happened now, and these are services which customers by the day are. So it's not a future; it is today being sought, and what it is doing for them is obviously helping them collect and pay efficiently, right? I think it's if it all boils down, this is all around the periphery, but finally, if somebody is having a surplus and able to invest in time, and in case of a shortfall, borrow, and finally on a working capital side, whether there's a bridge in between and how. So as a solution partner, as a bank, are you able to do the end-to-end game? You refer to the whole ecosystem, saying, now there is a credit piece to the entire piece. I think the next big wave, which already looked at by select players and very actively looked at by most people, are the whole credit decisioning aspects. So on retail, you have Insta loans, for example, but wholesale, a different ball game. So that's something as a next focus area coming up. Trade, I'll have Srinivas cover, I guess, but that's the big next stream for where most of the corporates now open.
Yeah.
So it's really now a client market. He's got to pick the best player and able to orchestrate an end-to-end process for him to that. So.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Rajesh. That was really very, very useful. Moving on to Mr. Venkatesh, a question for you is that we see that you're taking UNO to business customers. What is the value offer that you would be making to small businesses, and the difference the platform would make to large corporates?
Yeah, so the pandemic has pushed, let's say, the ecosystem into searching for greater efficiencies. So business looks for lower financial costs and enhanced business efficiency. So, and as you look at the regulators as well, so while they would definitely like banks to have better control over risk and financial management, they would also want, a greater flexibility to customers to choose and pick product solutions, choose select banks, and all of that. Now, in the entire, the sweep of business customers, we have the small and medium enterprises. So, one of the things that which is actually already in place, I think many banks are already offering, is a certain pre-approved business loans, or pre-approved merchant loans. So, so these are something which are taking off in a big way. And in fact, we had an excellent experience in the personal front when we offered our pre-approved personal loans. So we have, in fact, as of date, our current daily run rate is around 20,000 approvals per day pre-approved personal loans. So on the same lines, like we have rolled it out to, let's say, the proprietary firms because the due diligence is that much easier. And so you're looking at businesses which have access to solutions like, for example, funds in these critical times. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and so one of the important things we did, which takes care of business across the spectrum, is the aspect of digital LC opening, for example. Now, LC opening has become a paperless journey totally. I mean, what used to be quite voluminous, cumbersome, somebody having to come to the bank branch to get its LC open. So all of this can be done digitally, and there's no need for any email, there's no need for any fax, no scanned email, nothing at all. So you have the customers, whether the small business or the large business, who may have multiple layers of, let's say, user controls. So you have the maker, the checker, and you have even auditors in some corporates who want to kind of look at all of this. So you have LC letter of credit. I think Srinivas is also touching upon when he talked about SWIFT. So you have this entire thing which has been made so efficient, user-friendly for the customer that the entire thing is paperless. And in State Bank of India, in the corporate client space, 90% close to 90% of our import LCs are opened on the digital platform. So this has happened during the pandemic. In fact, April, May, that was the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown and all of that, and business had almost come to a standstill. And then when it really began picking up from June, July onwards, we were of course ready with the platform as well. So we are currently looking at, as I told you, 90% of our import LCs being opened on the digital platform. So there is the demand that is coming from business who are really looking for efficiencies, managing their funds, and plus, so that they're able to really focus on what they do best. So there is so much of space, and supply chain is another, I guess, huge opportunity that is available to banks. And of course, we at State Bank, and I'm sure all lenders would like to be, let's say, an integrator of integrators, kind of, if I may use the word. So connecting business to business, and supply chain is really, we have, in the personal space, we have so many, let's say, platforms that are coming, whether it's PhonePe or Paytm, Google Pay, and WhatsApp and all that. So we have, of course, a SBI YONO Quick Pay also, but we don't have that much of offerings on the commercial for the business customers. So I think there's a lot of scope there, and I think it is compelling banks now to get into that space, because with the NIMs shrinking, I think banks will have to get into those space, and sooner we get into them, the better. And also, if I may digress a little bit, because there's another thing I wanted to talk about, but I probably I will bring it into this question. Is regulators also now, for example, Reserve Bank of India has come in with stipulations of current accounts for cash credit and overdraft customers. So Reserve Bank, they come out with the latest guidelines saying that there cannot be any current account for borrowers who have cash credit facility. Now this actually changes this one altogether, because it would immediately seem to be impacting operations, because at certain times current accounts may be required, if you have many number of outlets, etc. So this actually now compels banks to look at the aspect of virtual account solution. So where you have a single account, but you have multiple virtual accounts, and then you can map each virtual account to your customers of your office. So the reconciliation becomes easy for the customer, and the cash management as well. But underlying is just a single account. So I think there's huge opportunities there, and I think these are, COVID, what I can see, of course, sadly, it's been fatal for a few people, and some families have suffered immeasurably. But overall, I think it has really hurdled the entire ecosystem, business, banks, lenders, all of us to get into, looking at efficiencies, to use, harness, data, harness analytics, AI, ML, what have you, and to provide the best offering to customers and in a very democratic way. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks a lot for your views, sir. Thank you very much. Moving on to Mr. Srinivas, this is the last question that we will take, and then we'll open the floor for questions to the participants. Mr. Srinivas, global trade has been disrupted and redefined by the pandemic. The World Trade Organization estimates that the world merchandise trade would decline between 13 and 32% in 2020 alone. Given these changes, what are some operational continuity challenges that you see in general?
Yeah, but Eric, before I start, I just want to be slightly optimistic. In fact, there is a projection is coming between 13 to 32% and all. But when Sonu was talking, she mentioned very clearly that, yes, there was a downstream between April to June, and then there has been a pickup. And we all hope for that the pickup has to be steady, continuous, and it will grow further also. That is my way of looking at it. And then we are also seeing the volumes that has come back almost to normalcy. Maybe in certain products, it is a bit lower than what it used to be earlier. But comparatively, many of the products we have actually touched, and then we have breached the actual numbers also. So I'm slightly, that's my personal opinion, is that I'm more optimistic that, yes, the pandemic, the related environment is having its own challenges. But yes, from the energy that we are looking around in the market, as well as in the general man's, the common man's life, though there are challenges, it is still continuing and then running. So everything is moving around us. So my point of view is, yeah, challenges are there. Suppose in case what the WTO is saying happens, then that gives an opportunity for us to actually relook into our processes. What has gone wrong earlier, what I could not rectify for the customer, and what I could have done better. For example, what Mr. Parag said, that hyper customization is going to be the way forward, because now each and every customer want to have a personalized solution, like how they are getting the transactions done in a retail banking scenario. Similarly, the corporate customer also expecting that kind of the engagements. Customer would like to have a proper nudges about what is going to happen next on this particular transaction. When you do this, would you like to keep a reminder for you to make a payment on due date? Would you like to send some other outward statement to you? So kind of a nudges we can give, and then that will make the customer life much more, the corporate customer life much more personalized with the transactions. And then, each and every stage of the transaction is much more, interesting for the customer. It's not like, they are uploading an image and then submitting, the bank is processing, and then advisors are coming. Instead of that, the customer gets engaged in a corporate level transaction also. And that is the way it is going to be. And then the lean time has to be used by the bank to think through the processes, streamline the system efficiencies, and bring better controls.
Thank you once again to all the participants for really sharing their insights and thoughts on the subject. Now I'd like to open the floor to the participants who are there on the other side to ask any questions. Just one thought of hygiene is that please direct the question to the person you want them to answer, so that the right person is able to answer the questions. Mr. Venkatesan really talked about these virtual accounts now gaining a lot of prominence and importance in India, also with certain guidelines that the Reserve Bank of India has really come out with. The virtual accounts have been a reality in other geographies. So I'd like to pose this question to Parag as to how are you really seeing other geographies handle this concept of virtual accounts, and can you throw some light on the same?
Sure. So I think, virtual accounts, they've been in existence for a while now. When you talk about different other geographies as well, maybe India is right now just trying to understand. But let's say virtual accounts or virtual identifiers, as we all knew it, from a perspective of let's say collections, typically large insurance company or a large telecom company wanting to ensure that they give different identifiers for people to give payments with, and ensuring that the reconciliation happens. That's a pretty standard use case as far as that is concerned. But what we as Oracle see is we have a full-blown virtual accounts platform, and this particular virtual accounts platform really caters to multiple different use cases. So one use case, as we all talked about, is payments on behalf of, or POBO or COBO as we call it now, which is collections on behalf or liquidity on behalf. Typically, this goes very well, and especially in the pandemic, a lot of conversations that banks are having with their corporates is to reduce cost. And one of the big drains on cost is just for the corporate to maintain the hierarchy of accounts that they normally do, and thereby maintaining of those accounts, the KYC is involved in it, and so on and so forth. So the cost and efficiency are two big drivers as far as we are seeing, especially in the midst of the pandemic. And if you really look at the low interest environments or the zero interest geographies that we have, let's say in Europe and other places, virtual accounts is becoming also a very interesting tool as far as managing liquidity is concerned. So overall, I think from a virtual accounts perspective, Eric, the way the adoption is really the use cases that we spoke about on the collection side, but payments on behalf of collections, reconciliation, having a client money management. These are some of very, very standard use cases that we now are seeing. And I'm sure from an Indian market perspective also, these are going to be very, very relevant, because reconciliation, as we all know, is a humongous problem as far as, and given the volumes that India has, I think it's a very, very solid product to offer corporate clients, Eric. I don't know if others have any more thoughts. Please feel free to jump in if you want to add something on virtual accounts.
Just a quick one. Hi, Rajesh here. So virtual accounts, I think the whole genesis came about post the whole ability of wholesale to use digital banking, especially on the collection. I think
is it only me, or I'm not able to hear Rajesh?
No, I think
disturbance.
I think there is a little bit of disturbance there.
the line is dropping.
Mm-hmm. Eric, there is also one more interesting question that.
There is a question for the panel.
I think there was a big challenge for coming.
Yeah. Sorry, Rajesh.
It's a great solution.
We have lost the.
Eric, you mind taking the next question, Eric? There is one interesting question.
I'll just take the question. That's for any of the panel members who wish to really answer that. With the cash flows going and money reaching destinations 24/7 RTGS, are we moving to a fee-based payment systems as evident in Europe? That's the question that somebody was asking.
Hi, sorry, I dropped
go on mute. Mr. Srinivasan, can you go on mute, please?
No, I'm not talking.
So there was a question, Rajesh, that we were just tackling from one of the panelists. With cash flows going and money reaching destinations 24/7 RTGS, that's what you really talked about. Are we moving to a fee-based payment systems as evident in Europe? That was the question.
Yeah, I actually hinted to that we are now getting into more, the definition of cash management is changing, and it's more now liquidity and overall flow management. I think the logistics ability to pay and receive is practically there with most banks in some degree here and there. I think value-added services of recon, dashboards, ability to integrate with client systems will be the differentiation, and how quickly you do and how agile you are. Because it's not about one time, right? The moment you integrate yourself as one of the constituents in the flow of a customer, you have to remain dynamic. It's every industry. Monu referred to, the whole auto industry. So an auto and pharma work very different, right? So if you need to have the relevant wherewithal as banks to be able to manage that whole, what we call as, the value chain and the whole system, so that you are relevant in the scheme of things for a customer and hopefully a group of customers or the entire business. So yes, that seems to be the trend. However, there's a big difference. Europe generally, and if you see SEPA or any of these large standards that have got rolled out in Europe, generally follows a very standard driven process, and then there is a mandate across the banking and financial system to kind of adopt, and then it goes. India, with its unique approaches, finds its way, and you have a lot of these variations and that come about, and then there is a fair amount of productization around it, right? So it takes a little longer. It's a long way, but it's a good way. You really find great solutions or great answers, and really something which is kind of world beating in many of these cases. But yes, if to answer it in simple, is the whole thing moving from a float to a fee? Seems to be the trend. It's a matter of time. Not just this, there are multiple indicators that are now leading to this. Flight of money from A to B is very constant, very quick. It is now in the hands of the customer completely. It was not the case some time back. I think within the banking system, there has to be an enable of what we have, for want of a better word, like a continuous link settlement or the international markets where you settle between. I think that's something to be evolved, which with market ask and all this, there will be a push. And I think it's like the stock markets, right? There was a settlement of T+7, went to 5, went to T+2, and now maybe 1. Something similar here. So yes, it's moving there. And obviously, as bankers and overall, all of us are in profit entities, so we'll look at ways and means to really offer services at the right cost. So then there is an efficiency model built around it. So yeah, seems to be the way.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you. I think we are hitting the end of time. So Babu, if there are no questions further, then probably if any of the panel members has an opinion, you can share that, or then I would kind of close this panel discussion. So if anybody wants to share any views, opinions, thoughts, please feel free to do that. Okay. So I guess then I will call it the end of the day. So just the parting thought that, yes, things are grim right now. It's not looking positive. But as they always say, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Rajesh, Parag, and everybody on this panel has really confirmed that they are seeing a lot of signs that things are reviving and getting back to normalcy. So I think probably, Babu, the next session, when you have it after a few months, we'll see a lot of changes in that. So with that, thank you once again to all the panel members for taking out this time and being on the panel discussion. Really grateful to you. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for a wonderful moderation. I think you kept a lot of, you kept everyone going there. And every panelist have really taken the best, foot forward in sharing the best information, whatever we could get in this short span of time. And thank you very much. We have just overshot the time by 15-20 minutes, but thank you for bearing with us there. And the next session, which we would probably like to have, we would like to discuss about not just aiming towards higher growth, but managing growth, where you would see a lot more growth that would happen. And considering the way the stock markets are going, considering the way the promises that people are seeing, let us hope that we would have our future sessions on managing growth rather than just planning for growth. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to Parag and his team at Oracle also to be a partner with us and exploring this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you.